This is a video about how to open up and dismantle a WX5 Yamaha Wind Controller. I've had this one for many years. I've opened it up several times for various repairs, and it's not too difficult as long as it's in good condition. I'll go through that a bit more in a minute. First, a disclaimer, I'm not a professional music repairer. I'm not being paid to do this video. I have no sponsors. This is just me telling you as a fellow wind synth enthusiast how to open this up. So you do it at your own risk. I accept absolutely no responsibility for what happens. Okay, so WX5, the enclosure is in two parts. And it runs along this line here, and basically there's screws here that you need to undo to open this up, this casing, but the casing runs through into the mouthpiece area, so in order to separate the upper and lower housings, you have to take the mouthpiece and this collar off. Now this should be fairly easy to do, and in my case it is, because this is well maintained. This mouthpiece is only held on by friction. There's a rubber boot inside here, and the mouthpiece is just kind of squeezed on. So to take it off, you literally have to take a firm grip of the neck of the instrument, firm grip of this, and gently but with consistent pressure pull them apart. Easy to say, but if you haven't opened it up for many years, what will happen is that there'll be a lot of muck and gunk that collects inside the mouthpiece, and that will dry up and effectively stick the mouthpiece in position, so it can be quite hard to do. When you grip this, you can apply a little rotational pressure, not too much to begin with, because there's a notch there. I don't know if you can see it. There's a notch that aligns the mouthpiece, so you can't rotate it too much. But if it is sticking, you can apply a little bit of rotational pressure as you pull apart. The other thing that might help if it is stuck is to gently warm this area up with warm air to heat up that gunk inside, but just warm air, I'd emphasise, because this is all plastic and rubber. If you put hot air on here for too long, you're going to melt things and burn things. So if you're in doubt, it's probably best to send it to a professional to do, but I'll show you mine because it's very easy. Grip it and just pull, it comes straight off. So that's the mouthpiece. There's just nothing in there. It's just a plastic mouthpiece. There's no hooks, nothing. It's just frictional pressure from the boot. So here's the boot, the rubber boot, and there's a couple of ribs along there that help to apply that frictional pressure to the mouthpiece so it doesn't come off. So what you're looking at there is this is the pitch bend lever, so this end of the cantilever presses against the reed if you're using this reed arrangement. So when you tighten your embouchure, it results in movement of this lever, and inside, as you'll see, there's a magnet that moves away from a sensor. So that's how the instrument can work out when you're tightening pressure on the reed for pitch bend purposes. There's a couple of other things of interest here, if I bring it a bit closer. So the first thing is this this tube here, which is the air velocity tube. So as you blow, air is going through this into another sensor inside the instrument. I don't know if you can quite see that. And then there's again, let me just adjust this, see if that helps. There's a hole there, and that connects to an air tube basically that runs the full length of the instrument right down here to the bottom where there's a drain hole there. So that allows you to blow, but with comfort, because there's an escape route for air that runs along the instrument. Okay, so so this has to come off, but there's a collar here. This too has to slide off, and again, it's easy for me to do. Might be a bit more difficult for you if it's stuck. Again, the same thing, pressure, maybe a bit of warm air to warm it up. One thing I have done in the past, I kind of hesitate to say this, but use, if you're still having trouble, use plastic tools like they have for opening mobile phones, perhaps, to kind of wedge in the gap between the collar and the body of the instrument and wiggle it a bit and move around to try and break the seal, if you like. But for me, again, this will come off quite easily. So it slides off. Okay, so that comes off. So there you have it. You have the instrument without the mouthpiece and without the collar. So what you'll see here is this part here is the rubber boot, and all this has to come off in order to remove the boot entirely, so that the upper and lower casings can separate. So what you have to do is basically work a blunt plastic instrument like this one behind at the bottom of the boot to, as I'll show you, to lever it outwards. Okay, so you can see that. You've got to be really careful if you're using a sharp instrument, or if this rubber is very brittle because it's not being maintained, you might split it. Okay, that's the risk of you doing the work. So again, any doubt, just send it to a professional. So once you've got your plastic tool behind that, you basically need to roll it forward. So I'm using my fingers now. So if you kind of fold it over like this, and then it's easy to roll up. Oop, I say that and it falls back, but there we go. Okay. Oop. There. Okay. So hopefully that will stay there. Let me just pull it a little bit. Okay. So that's the bottom of the rubber boot folded over, and what it does is then it exposes the edge of the instrument enclosure, and that's far enough because now I can undo the screws and separate this piece. We'll do that now. So there's 13 screws that you have to undo. You need a crosshead Phillips type screwdriver. Make sure you get the right size to fit well. So 13 screws. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let me tilt it this way a bit. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And 13. So all of them have to come out. So I'll do that. Okay, so that's all 13 screws out. Now the top and bottom halves should separate quite easily along this line here. Again, if it's not been opened for some time, it may be a bit sticky to begin with. You could try using one of these plastic tools again that they use for opening mobile phone cases and work it along there, but for me it should come straight out because I open it regularly. Just one thing, when you open it, this lip zero thumb wheel here, that is like a top hat sitting on top of a potentiometer that is not connected. It's just held in place by the cover. So as soon as you open the cover, that's going to drop out. So be careful that you're not sitting somewhere where it could fall and you lose it. So we're starting at this end. I'm just going to kind of wiggle this, and it's coming up. Okay, so if I turn it sideways, you can see that the two halves are separated. Okay, now just work it gently, but don't pull them apart too vigorously, because there's a couple of connections that go between them. You don't want to break them. But this up this end, I'm just going to pull that a bit away there. So I needed to actually pull that rubber a bit further than I'd done originally. Sorry. Yeah. So I pulled it to this step. Actually, it needs to go right up to the top. That's why I was having problems separating it. So now they come apart. Okay, you'll see now that thumb wheel I was telling you about for lip zero's disappeared. It's sitting in there somewhere. Okay, so now I can gently just move the top away. Okay, and so it's disconnected all the way along here, but at the bottom there's a couple of things that hold it in place. One is the bottom of the drain tube to the drain hole. All you need to do is to gently pull that to come away from the connector there. If you have problems with that, if it's stuck, the other thing you can do is there's a bracket there holding this whole assembly in place. If I lift it up a bit, so all you need to do is to undo those two screws and the whole assembly will come away. But all I need to do is to just gently pull the drain tube away. So that's that one. The second thing you have to do is there's a connector here that goes to the MIDI. The WX MIDI connector on the other side, you'll see there, and that's connected via this connector here. That just needs to be pulled away, and that will disconnect. But there's also this little kind of flexible arm here that's holding the wires in place, so you need to bend that away so you can move the wires out. Okay, and then you just need to pull that. Now just be careful when you do that, because you obviously don't want to pull the wires out of the connector, so it may help to use tweezers or kind of specialist tweezers like this if you're having problems, but you can gently push the connector away. There, that's it. So basically now that connector's unplugged, two halves are now separated. Okay, so I can put that over there. So you're left with the top casing there with the keys and the circuit board. Now to get to the lever here, this is the pitch bend lever, you have to entirely remove this boot. And it's held in place by two tubes. One is the tube here, which is the drain, the airflow tube. That simply comes apart by just pulling gently there. There we go. So that's disconnected. The second tube is the tube that measures the airflow as you blow. That's actually connected to the other side of this component here. So what we have to do is actually lift away the PCB to get to the underside of that, to unplug it, and then this whole thing can come away. Moving the PCB is quite easy actually. It's not such a difficult task. There's only two screws holding the PCB in now, because it's normally held in place by all the other screws that we've taken away. So right now there's only two more screws to remove. There's one there, and there's one on that at the bottom that has this flexible arm to hold the wiring loom. So we just take those two off. Okay, so now you should be able to gently prise the PCB off of the base. It's kind of held now in a couple of places by friction, if you like, between the column there and the PCB, and the same up here. So you can put something gently underneath again to kind of begin to prise it up, but be very careful, of course. There we go. Okay, so now that the PCB is loose, but it's held in place by three connectors on this side, and there may be one underneath, but the three connectors are here, here, oh there's four, sorry, there's one there and there's one there. So these three again are just plugs that press into the connector, so you very gently you can remove them. There we go. That one. That one. This one. Okay, so that's those three connectors. The fourth one is a different type of connector, still very easy, but it's a ribbon cable that goes straight into the connector, and the way you release this is to the outer casing of this connector you grab and you pull forward towards the connector. So there you see, that slides backwards and forwards, so I've released it backwards. That's released the clamping of the ribbon cable, and again very gently you can ease this out. There we go. Okay, so that's come out now. Right, so that's all the connectors unplugged. I can now lift this. Be careful, this wiring loom here has a light bend in it, and it's stopping me pulling the PCB away, so I have to move it slightly to get the wiring loom underneath it. Okay, so that's the PCB coming away now. If I turn it sideways, you'll see. Okay, so that's the underneath, and here is the connector I was telling you about. So there's two ways of pulling this out. You can actually pull it straight out this way, or I tend to pull it away from the board gently. There we go. Okay, so that's the underside of the PCB. This is a mod I did. You won't have this on yours, but it's a mod I did to enable me to power this from the standard MIDI connector, not the WX5 connector. If you're interested in how I did that, just get in touch. So that's your PCB. Okay, so what's left is the top end with you've got the airflow tube now that you can see. That's very easy to remove. You can just pull it out now if you wanted to clean that up. But I'm interested in this end here, which is the mouthpiece end. So I want to look at this cantilever a bit closer, and the way to do that is this whole boot now will slide through. Slide the cantilever would just stay in position, but you have to do this very carefully so that you don't damage anything. So again, firm grip, and just with a gentle wiggle. There we go. So it's now, I can now pull this through. Okay, so that's the boot, put that there, and here's the cantilever mechanism. Let's get this out of the way. Okay, so you can see now how this works. As you apply pressure on the reed, the lever is activated, and at this end here you have a magnet which is stuck to the end of the lever. So movement of this moves the magnet closer or further away from a sensor. Okay. In the past I've had the problem where, and many people have, this magnet, eventually the glue deteriorates and the magnet just falls off. So sometimes people notice that there's no response to pitch bend at all, and it could be that, and I've had that a couple of times where I've had to basically just with good adhesive put the magnet back on. There's a small pivot pin here. I don't know if you can just see that. If I bring this a bit closer, there's a pivot there, and that holds this mechanism in place. Now actually the pin can just slide right out now. There's nothing holding it in place. So when you're doing this operation, be very careful you don't lose it. I've in the past dropped it without realising, and I've replaced the pin. You can get solid wire or a very small diameter metal rod and just replace that, and that's fine. If you do that, the length of this has to be just enough to go through this plastic housing, and through there's obviously a hole in the cantilever right there that holds it in place. When that boot goes back on, that molds itself right around this piece here and holds that pivot pin in place. Okay. The other problem people sometimes have is that they need to bend this lever needs to be bent very slightly, because when it's fully assembled, this end of the lever has to rest against the reed of the mouthpiece. If it doesn't, if there's a gap, as you tighten your embouchure and put pressure on the reed, slight movement that won't move this lever because there's a slight air gap, so that you're losing a bit of resolution. So what you want this really ideally, when it's all back together, that rests nicely on the reed, so any movement of the reed results in movement of that lever. Okay, so that's dismantling the WX5. Let's put it all back together now. So the first thing is to just reverse the operation really. So we need to slide this back on now. It's difficult to see. Can't really see, but yeah. So this is going to slide back on this way. That kind of that hole there with the arch. You can see it there. Let's have a look. There we go. You can see a hole there. That's the part that fits nicely, snugly around this piece here. When I put this back, I tend to grease this piece a bit, because there's a very small hole. It's really difficult. I don't think you can see it on this. Oh, there you can. there's a very small round hole that this square, this flat blade fits through, so you've got to be careful not to split this. So I tend to take a bit of this recorder cream and just grease the sides a little bit. There we go. Okay, so now we've got to line this up, and remember it fits that way because the tubes have to sit that way. So what you want to do is just locate the hole. Let me find it. Can you see it? I don't know if you can. There's a hole there that this needs to fit through. So let's do that. There we go. Now, as you're pushing this, remember that and the pivot pin there, I don't know if you can see it, but the pivot pin has already started to slide. So you've got to be careful that as you're pushing this boot back, the pivot pin is in place. So it is now. So if I gently push, there we go. There. Okay, so that's now in place. So the boot is around where the pivot pin is. The pivot pin can't move. I just test the lever there, and that's fine. That's all moving nicely. Okay, so there's a couple of things we have to do now. One is to connect the air drain tube back. So let's do that. When you do reassemble, make sure that there's some cutaways on these ribs here for the tube to sit through. If it's not sitting there, when you try and piece them back together, the lower housing is going to you'll feel resistance because it's pushing against the tube if it's not in place. So make sure that's there. Okay, so just slide that tube back on. Okay, so we've got the drain tube in place, and now we've got to connect this back onto the PCB. So I'll offer up the PCB, that's the receiving end there. So basically over the top, just gently press, so that's in place. Okay, just make sure that the tubes are sitting in their cutaways nicely. Then you just need to maneuver the PCB back into place. Pull all the connectors out so they're not trapped underneath when you seat the PCB in place. That one there, that one. Okay, so the 4 connectors are popping out from underneath, which is fine. Problem with the location of this tube, just got to put it back into its cutaway. Okay, so it's sitting nicely. We can just now plug these back in. So the first one goes in there, just gently plug that one in, this one into here, and then this one into here. Again, these wires all have cutaways. You just got to make sure they're sitting in them nicely like that. That one goes underneath, is tucked away underneath. Okay, and then finally there's this ribbon cable. Again, make sure that the outer casing of this connector is pulled forward. Then slide this one in, and then give it some pressure to push forward, and then evenly apply pressure to put the outer casing back. That now clamps it in place. So that's all your connectors in place. Now we've got the 2 screws to fix, so let's seat this exactly in its position. There we go. Okay, so that's all in place. So let's put these 2 screws back, one in the middle there. And then the final one holds that flexible arm. That goes there. Right, okay, so that's a PCB fixed. So now we have to put the bottom section back on, and then remember there's those 2 points of connection. One is this connector which slides into there, and we have the drain tube to go into the connector there, the drain plug. And then we just have to fold these wires behind this arm so that the arm can be folded down and hold them in place. There we go. You just got to make sure that the arm is clear of this screw hole here, otherwise the bottom half won't fit snugly onto the PCB there if it's in the way. Okay, so that's everything. We just got to replace the 2 halves. Just check that these cables, there's nothing, none of these cables are over the edges here, so that when you press the 2 bits together they're not connecting well. So there is one thing I forgot, which is here, the small top hat thumb wheel that now has to sit on. There's the hole. This part here is the potentiometer that this little top hat sits on. It's got, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a small cross section at the bottom, and that sits in the cross section recess in this potentiometer. So it's a bit fiddly now because this just rests on it. So the first thing to do is to place this top hat onto the potentiometer and then gently rotate it until you feel that the 2 crosses have mated and it's popped in. And then you have to rest it there. So try not to move the top section that is now resting on the desk here, because if you move it vigorously, that's going to drop off. But what you have to try and do is align the 2 halves together. There we go, and the thumb wheel has popped through there nicely. And then you just press the 2 halves together. Make sure there's nothing, no resistance, which would suggest that you've got trapped wires or anything like that. That fits nicely. It's worth just checking that this thumb wheel doesn't rotate without pressure, meaning that it hasn't sat properly on the potentiometer. So that's all good. So there, it's all reassembled. Now to put in those 13 screws. Okay, it's all together now. You can just check this, the joining crack along here basically to make sure it's nice and even. Again, that if you've got something trapped, you're going to have a bit bigger gap because they're not sitting together properly. So that's that. The only other thing to do now is to push the boot back into position. Just make sure this is nice and clean, and then basically you just want to put a bit of pressure to this to fold back over like that. Okay, and then again there. Okay, so that's nicely in place now, pushed right up against the collar of the instrument, no gaps, all nice there. Now before putting the mouthpiece on, you want to make sure this is A, clean, and B, lubricated. So clean this, you've probably got years worth of gunk all around here. You want to clean it like this one, nice and clean, nothing on there. So just warm soapy water. Probably best to do it actually, of course, before it's on the instrument, when it was off. So, but that's a nice clean boot there, nothing on there. And then take some recorder cream and just apply it around to keep it nice and lubricated, and that will prevent it cracking, and it will also mean the mouthpiece slides on really nice and easy. So first of all, the collar, there's a small key there which aligns with the key on the body there, so gently thread it over, push it there, there we go. Okay, and then finally the mouthpiece. Again, when you've got this mouthpiece off, it's a good idea to wash it. Take the reed off. I've already done it, but warm soapy water, get all the muck out. And then this, the piece there is the key again, which will align with this part here. Okay, so just really look how easily that slips on. Lovely. Final thing to check is, I don't know if you can see it here, but the lever is now sitting against the reed, which is perfect. That's exactly what I want. So any slight movement now is moving that lever. And that's it. So I hope you found that useful. Just take your time, don't rush anything. But if you encounter problems, it's definitely better to send it to professional repairer. Okay, if you've got any thoughts on what you've learned, love to hear from you. If you want anything else, to know anything else that I might be able to help with, just get in touch. Thank you.